Once, this was a mountain, the tallest in Oregon. Then fire and lava tore her apart, emptied her, leaving a crater 6 miles across and burying surrounding Indian villages in ash. Over centuries, rain and snow filled her with the purest blue water, making her the deepest, and many say the most beautiful, lake in America.
The following have provided major funding for the Mirror of Heaven.
We're Geldwin, and for more than 40 years, we've been making windows and doors. Home edition, energy bill subtraction. Geldwin Windows and Doors.
Oregon vacations start at traveloregon.com. For statewide tourism information, contact the Oregon Tourism Commission.
Lobi, Gaak, Blai, Yaina, Blai Dalkni, Lao, Chiasda.
In the beginning was Mount Mazama. The stories Native Americans have told about this mountain and this lake for 77 centuries have been recorded in the late 1800s by Captain Oliver Applegate, son of pioneers of the Applegate Trail that passed through Klamath lands.
Lao was chief of the down below world. Fire, smoke, and darkness in the middle of the earth, never lighted by the sun.
Geologists like Howell Williams of the University of California at Berkeley tell a different story. For hundreds of millions of years, the ocean floor of the Pacific, called the Juan de Fuca Plate, has been creeping eastward and diving under the landmass of the Northwest. This movement has squeezed the magma, the subterranean liquid rock mass, upward, creating over the last 15 million years the Cascade Mountains of Oregon, Washington, and Northern California. Mount Mazama was part of that mountain range. For millions of years, Mazama erupts with lava flows, flying rock, and ash falls. A cooling in the climate creates glaciers. When the glaciers leave, humans come to live there.
In this time lived the Mucklucks, the people before the Klamaths and Modocs. It was a peaceful land of forests and meadows, rivers and lakes, but for the smoldering mountain. The old chief's daughter, Aloha, was fair as dawn, and her voice was like the music of whispering waters. She was loved by the people for her daring and kindness. Lao, watching from Mount Mazama, spied the beautiful maiden and desired her for his own. Lao approached her, saying, "Come live with me in the middle of the earth. You shall have all the things you wish for." But Aloha refused him, and Lao grew angry and filled the land with rumbling. Fire burned in his eye.
The morning light shines brilliantly on the ice around the summit of Mazama. Suddenly, there's an ominous rumbling underground, and a plume of steam rises from the crater. The slumbering volcano has awakened. The plume expands into a giant cloud shaped like a cauliflower and rises miles into the upper air.
The chiefs sought the help of Steele, the god of the upper world, ruler of the sun, the forests, and the animals that live. Steele beheld the maiden, Aloha, and adored her and vowed to battle in her defense. Enraged, Lao thundered and threw fire about for 5 days, then put on his robe of thick water smoke to hide himself, to put from sight the land of Mucklucks he now hated.
The climax comes suddenly. A glowing white-hot avalanche of ash, dust, and gases surges from the volcano and races at speeds of 100 miles an hour through the surrounding valleys, mowing down forests and wiping out all life in its path.
To end the ruin of her land, the maiden Aloha offered herself as a sacrifice, but the holy man, who knew the will of the gods, said no, and Lao complained to the Great Spirit, saying humans should not possess the secrets of the spirit world and know things to come before they happen. And Lao demanded the medicine men be sacrificed to him.
The pyroclastic flows reach far into the Klamath Basin and Rogue and Umpqua valleys 40 miles away. The huge magma chamber inside Mazama is emptied, and the mountain can no longer support its own weight. The next day, the last day of Mount Mazama's life, with noises of terrifying intensity, the great mountain comes crashing down, leaving a great hole in the earth.
The medicine men came to the edge of the opening and looked into the fiery eyes of Lao. Then they leapt, giving themselves to him as a sacrifice to appease him. Lao was vanquished, and the mountain went crashing down. All that remained was a great hole in the earth.
When the smoke begins to clear several days later, the majestic ice-clad peak that had dominated the landscape has disappeared. In its place is a stupendous cauldron, 6 miles across, 4,000 feet deep. Jets of steam hiss and roar from fissures. The new crater is unusual, with an even rim all around so no water can flow out, and so high no springs can flow in. Over a few centuries, rain and snow fill it, creating a deep, clear lake.
When the sun arose next morning, the people saw Lao's mountain was gone. Snaith, the god of rain and storms, filled the hole with water, and peace had returned to the land.
From the earliest days of contact with white settlers, the native people of southern Oregon don't talk about the huge crater filled with still blue water. On his journey to Crater Lake for the first time in 1885, William Gladstone Steele, the man who would preserve Crater Lake as a national park, visits the Klamath tribe.
Long before the white man appeared in this region to vex and drive the proud native out, a band of Klamaths, while out hunting, came suddenly upon the lake and were startled and awed by its majestic proportions. Something within told them the Great Spirit dwelt there, and they dare not remain. One brave was induced to return. He went up to the very precipice and started his campfire. Here he slept till morn. Each visit bore a charm that drew him back again. He suddenly became hardier and stronger than any Indian of his tribe because of his many visits to the mysterious waters. Others then began to seek its influence. Old warriors sent their sons for strength and courage. William Steele.
This tale, probably handed down for thousands of years, is what anthropologists call a vision quest, a ritual where one withdraws into the wilderness to seek out the Great Spirit or spirits, asking for a vision to guide and empower their lives. In the late 19th century, the Bureau of Indian Affairs stamps out tribal religions. The vision quests become clandestine after the Klamath Lake Treaty of 1864. An article in the Overland Monthly magazine in 1873 reads,
"The medicine men still came to Crater Lake as they always came in the olden time, to study spiritual wisdom and learn the secrets of the Great Spirit. In the solitude of these wilds, they listened to the winds that came from no one knew where, born there to hear the mysterious whispers of unseen beings, whose presence they doubted not, and whose words they longed to understand."
Some vision seekers were observed at Crater Lake as late as 1876, piling stones and performing sacred rites. And then they were seen no more.
It takes 30 years from the first white settlers' penetration into the region to find Crater Lake, and it takes gold to get them there.
It's 1853, and 2 young miners, John Wesley Hillman and Isaac Skeeters, have overheard gold seekers in a bar in Jacksonville bragging about a stash buried during an Indian attack. They shadow the mining party for days and are soon lost and starving. The men split up. Isaac Skeeters heads to upper ground, and on the last day before whites finally see Crater Lake, something unusual happens.
Walking was slow and difficult. Suddenly a snow-white deer stepped right in front of me, near enough that I could see that it had pink eyes. Instinctively, I raised my rifle to shoot, but was held spellbound by the beauty and unusual color of the animal, and I decided just to observe and admire it. At daybreak, I started out again. I was surprised when I discovered that I had circled the white fur, for when I came back to my tracks of the night before, I found moccasin tracks right behind my own. I always thought that if I had killed the white deer, that the Indian who followed me would have killed me, for I had been told that the Indians held a superstition for white deer. I shot my rifle and my friends answered some miles down the canyon, where I joined them. Isaac Skeeters.
Starving now, Hillman and Skeeters take their donkey and a small group of men to the Cascade Crest so they can get their bearings and head home.
Riding up a long sloping mountain, we suddenly came in sight of water, and we were very much surprised, as we did not expect to see any lakes. Not until my mule stopped within a few feet of the rim did I look down, and if I had been riding a blind mule, I firmly believe I would have ridden over the edge. John Hillman.
White people have finally found the majestic lake, which until now had lived only in rumor. Like millions after them, they are overwhelmed.
Every man of the party gazed with wonder at the sight before him, and each in his own peculiar way gave expressions to the thoughts within him. I was very anxious to find a way to the water, which was immediately vetoed by the whole party. We discussed what name we should give the lake. Mysterious Lake and Deep Blue Lake were most favorably received. On a vote, Deep Blue Lake was chosen. John Hillman.
Crater Lake slips into the category of rumor and fantasy. Then, a decade later, it is rediscovered by another miner, Chauncey Nye.
At no place could we see the remotest chance of being able to climb down to the water without the aid of long ropes. The water was of a deep blue color, causing us to name it Blue Lake, Chauncey Nye.
For the first time, the fact of Crater Lake's existence is printed in a newspaper, the Oregon Sentinel of Jacksonville. The editor declares it is too steep ever to be descended by humans to the water's edge. As if taking up a dare, a military party from nearby Fort Klamath, led by Captain Franklin Sprague, does just that. Encouraging his men to the task, Sprague says the first one to reach the water can name the lake. Sergeant Orson Stearns does the trick.
The captain turned to me and said, "Well, Sergeant, what are you going to call it?" I couldn't think of a good name to fit. "It deserves a good name, sir. I will have to think it over." "You're right," the captain agreed. "It's the most majestic body of water I ever saw." Then he said, "Sergeant, what do you think of naming it Lake Majesty?" Naturally, I acquiesced. Sergeant Orson Stearns.
By 1869, everyone from adventurers to women and children make the trip, and Jacksonville's editor Jim Sutton and his friend, carpenter David Lynn, build a boat and make the first soundings, paying out 550 feet of rope and finding no bottom. The myth of the bottomless lake begins. The Sutton party is the first to set foot on Wizard Island, ascending to its summit and pronouncing the name that will finally stick: Crater Lake. Now Crater Lake is on the map and coming to be recognized as the natural wonder it is. Amid the headlong abuse of nature's resources and beauty by miners, loggers, and herdsmen, a growing conservation movement struggles for the ear of Congress. President Lincoln makes Yosemite a park in 1864, and Grant saves Yellowstone in 1872. The national park pattern is set. Parks are for people, not profits. But no one has even seen a photograph of Crater Lake, one of the initial steps that it will take to begin the momentum to make Crater Lake a national park. Noted pioneer photographer Peter Britt of Jacksonville sets out to change that, lugging his heavy darkroom wet plate negatives and Voigtlander camera by wagon and mule for days up the Cascade Crest. Although it's August, usually the hottest, clearest time of year, Britt is greeted by overcast and drizzle, which flattens the depth of field and makes the view unimpressive. A miserable day passes. His party all catch colds. The next day they announce if the sun doesn't break by noon, they are going home. But for a minute, it does break. Britt gets the first shots of Crater Lake ever, including the one that will be used by Will Steele to herald the battle for Crater Lake.
William Gladstone Steele, the man who would save Crater Lake.
With a lineage that includes a British prime minister and activist parents who had a bounty on their heads for smuggling out slaves in the Underground Railroad, Steele grows up with the belief that he can stand up to power and make good things happen. A chance moment at age 15 changes the rest of Will Steele's life.
I was a farmer's boy and attended school 5 miles distant. My lunch was carried in a newspaper. One warm day in May 1870, I sat in the schoolroom eating from that paper. As I scanned the articles, I read of a sunken lake that had been discovered in Oregon. It was said to be 5,000 feet below the surface of the surrounding country. In all my life, I never read an article that took the intense hold on me that that one did. And I then and there determined to go to Oregon and to visit that lake and to go down to the water to climb Wizard Island and to take my lunch in its crater. I moved to Portland, Oregon in 1872 with my parents and immediately began seeking the sunken lake I had read about in Kansas. It was not until 1885, when there were railroads, that I was successful in getting there. William Steele.
Steele and his mountaineering pal, Portland druggist Johnny Breck, arrive at Crater Lake with a canvas canoe so they can make the half-mile paddle to the island.
To me, the first view was overwhelming. As I looked about, not a foot of the land had been touched or claimed. The thought occurred to me that at no point around this wonderful cauldron had the hand of man yet desecrated it with peanut stands or other marks of desolation. An overmastering conviction came to me that this wonderful spot must be saved, wild and beautiful, just as it was, for all future generations, and that it was up to me to do something. How, I did not know, but the idea of a national park appealed to me. William Steele.
Steele explores Crater Lake in a state of wonderment. His friends will later say he was dumbstruck, agitated, distressed. With the aid of the canoe, Steele realizes the goal of his boyhood, lunch inside the crater of that cinder cone, which that August day in 1885 he names Wizard Island. It looks like a wizard's hat, he later explained. Steele meets and teams up with Captain Clarence Dutton of the U.S. Geological Survey and the noted volcanologist Joseph LeConte of the University of California at Berkeley. The men are on their way to take scientific measurements of Crater Lake and establish theories on the collapse of the original Cascade Peak. Over the next few days, Steele confers with them about how to get things done in Washington, D.C., already rallying others to his mission to save Crater Lake.
Will Steele wastes no time and, as he would do all his life, moves directly into action starting at the top.
Steele makes the train trip across the country, the first of many for Crater Lake, to get the ultimate support from President Grover Cleveland. Steele and his circle of scientist allies convinced Cleveland that Crater Lake is a world treasure, and this was the standard disclaimer necessary for any set-aside land, that it was rough, broken land, unfit for cultivation. In February 1886, the president withdraws Crater Lake and the 10 townships around it from the market, this to protect it while Congress studies the national park bills. In 1886, to document Crater Lake's claim to preservation and national park status, Steele organizes the sort of scientific expeditions that made Yosemite, Yellowstone, and the Grand Canyon household names. The expedition, under the authority of John Wesley Powell, the director of the U.S. Geological Survey, includes the government's top biologists, geologists, and agricultural experts. Steele and Captain Clarence Dutton are assigned to build 3 boats for exploration and to take the first accurate soundings of the lake.
It was supposed we might possibly find as much as 100 feet of water, but as the lead ran out, our excitement grew with each succeeding 100 feet, until over 1,200 feet were out. Our pent-up feelings exploded in one wild yell of delight. We made the circuit of the lake on a sort of casual conversation. 4 strong oarsmen soon brought us to Llao Rock, and as we gazed in silent wonder at its rugged sides, reaching nearly half a mile above us, for the first time did we realize the immensity of such a spectacle. Here, all the ingenuity of nature seems to have been exerted to its fullest capacity to build one grand, awe-inspiring temple within which to live and from which to gaze upon the surrounding world and say, "Here I would live forever. The universe is my kingdom, and this is my throne." William Steele.
But still, a decade later, national park legislation languishes in committee. To rally key conservationists to the national park cause, Steele in 1896 summons 100 mountaineers from his Oregon Alpine Club, plus a stellar cast of scientists and federal officials to a grand expedition at Crater Lake. It's the mother of all Crater Lake expeditions, with mountain climbs, nature walks, studies, and lectures by the greats in the fields of biology and geology. Noted ichthyologists come to check on the unique situation created by Steele 8 years earlier. Crater Lake, fish-free for 7,000 years, was now stocked with 200 fingerling trout from the Rogue River, which Steele himself carried in a bucket, on foot, for 50 miles. Naturalist activist John Muir and Gifford Pinchot, the nation's first trained forester, view Crater Lake and the continuing devastation of surrounding forests. Pinchot's report leads directly to the creation of the U.S. Forest Service. The National Park Bill for Crater Lake is brought up every year, but quickly killed by timber, mining, and ranching lobbies.
Dear Mr. Steele, the majority of the Committee on Public Lands is opposed to the creation of any more national parks, and there is no possibility of securing passage at the present session of Congress, and I fear not in any future Congress. Senator Joseph Dolph.
Steele writes the influential book The Mountains of Oregon and forms the Oregon Alpine Club to help spearhead conservation in the state. Teamed with State Supreme Court Justice and naturalist John Waldo, Steele forges a political alliance, eventually gaining the support of President Harrison in setting aside the entire Cascade Mountain region. With this act ends the centuries-old tradition that the wilds belong to citizens to do with as they will. In 1893, President Harrison sets aside the 4.5 million acre Cascade Forest Reserve and puts a huge buffer around Crater Lake.
With the 20th century, momentum grows. National Geographic, Harper's, Science, and Nature all publish magazine articles on the wonders of Crater Lake and promote it as a national park. In 1899, Mount Rainier is made a national park, and for the first time, the Crater Lake bill makes it out of committee and onto the House floor. But it is stalled once again by timber, mining, and grazing lobbies. And then, with the assassination of President McKinley in 1901, everything changes for Crater Lake. Succeeding to the presidency is a conservationist and thoroughgoing outdoorsman, Teddy Roosevelt. With TR in the White House, Will Steele fires up his well-oiled machine of public outcry, rallies his Mazamas, and sends 4,000 petition signatures to Washington in March 1902. After 17 years of lobbying, Steele is well known as a pest, even a crackpot. Congressmen duck down hallways when they see him coming, but he stays cheerful and dogged. Finally, it's paying off. Oregon Sole Congressman Thomas Tongue again pulls the Crater Lake bill out of committee to the House floor. It is one man, the Speaker of the House, David Henderson of Iowa, who stands in the way. The Speaker has tremendous power, and he says, well, gee, half the congressmen in this place have national park bills they want passed. If I let you bring yours up, how am I going to keep saying no to the others? So forget it. And that was it. Chief Forester Gifford Pinchot appeals directly to the president, and Teddy Roosevelt, this new, young, very popular president, has a little chat with the speaker. This is the only time a president has ever intervened to get the passage of a national park bill, and in a matter of weeks, Crater Lake passes Congress, and on May 22nd, 1902, is signed by President Roosevelt. Now, Crater Lake belongs to the nation. Steele, always a little too pushy, is passed over as the park's first superintendent. So he becomes its first concessionaire, putting in all the cabins and tour boats, and he becomes a living legend, the grand old man of Crater Lake. And always persistent, he finally gets the superintendent's job. In just a matter of years, the motor cars will come, the roads will be paved, the big tour buses start rolling in. People start making the awe-inspiring rides in tour boats. Snowplows make it possible to visit nearly year-round, and millions of cameras start clicking. The so-called varmints, wolves, wildcats, and grizzly bears, soon verge on the edge of extinction at Crater Lake, while the more adorable animals, like black bears and chipmunks, soon become tame and overpopulated because they've been fed by humans. The recreationists, skiers, snowshoers, and Pacific Crest Trail hikers come to revel in the awe-inspiring beauty that Steele fought to protect and preserve. A magnificent hunting-style lodge is built and becomes a beloved icon of the Northwest. Today, 500,000 people visit Crater Lake National Park every year. The 33-mile rim drive encircles the lake, providing breathtaking vistas from 20 unique overlooks around Crater Lake. Over 90 miles of hiking trails include treks up Mount Scott and Garfield Peak, revealing panoramic views and volcanic natural wonders. The crystal blue waters at Cleetwood Cove are accessible by rugged mountain trail to the water's edge, where intrepid hikers can catch a few of the great-great-grandchildren of those fingerling trout planted by Will Steele so many years ago. Cleetwood Cove is the access point for a guided boat ride around Crater Lake. Here, park rangers, expert in the lake's geology, biology, and botany, share the facts and legends of this awe-inspiring natural wonder. Highlights include a hike to the top of Wizard Island Cinder Cone to stand in the center of one of the most amazing natural sights in the world, much as Will Steele did over a century ago.
I slipped out of camp one night, pulled out near the center, and stopped. There was not a breath breath of air stirring, and reflections were as perfect as it could have been in a plate glass mirror. I was an atom in the center of an enormous sphere, looking up to the starry heavens. The shoreline and its reflection appeared, with creation above, the creation below. Did ever human eye behold such a sight? Why should I be favored? God, in his infinite mercy, permitted me to look upon his glorious works as never man did before. Why should I not be grateful? William Steele.
The